Chapter 51. Against the Shadow. The ground sloped upwards as Rand's long legs ate up the distance, not caring if the thorns in the bushes tore at him. Moraine had stopped screaming now, though it felt it had gone on forever, each scream more throat-wrenching than the last. He knew Agenor would be following him now, and no other. He'd seen it in the Forsaken's eyes before he'd fled. The land grew steeper and Rand had to grip at the rocks and dirt to pull himself forward. Soon he had to crawl on hands and feet, panting when he reached the top with more even ground. What he saw made him want to howl aloud. The hilltop dropped away sharply. He hoped to find a path on the other side, some way to get down, but he knew he wouldn't. Looking down, he found 100-foot drop of a smooth wall. He thought about turning back and finding another way to elude the Forsaken, but when he turned, Agenor was topping the crest as he walked on level ground. His sunken-eyed face seemed less withered than before, more fleshed out as if something had renewed him. His eyes were fixed on Rand, yet he seemed to speak to himself.
But Alzaman will give rewards beyond dreaming for the one who brings you to Shayal Ghul. Yet my dreams have always been beyond those of other men. I left mortality behind millennia ago. What difference if you serve the great Lord of the Dark alive or dead? Why should I bend to you? I who faced Luz Therin Telamon in the Hall of the Servants itself. I who threw my might against the Lord of the Morning and met him stroke for stroke. I think not.
Rand's mouth was dry as he edged toward the precipice, loose stone falling away, but he didn't dare to look back. One more inch and he would fall and rebound as the rocks did, but he couldn't take his eyes off Agenor. He kept thinking that there must be a way to escape. There had to be. Suddenly he felt something, saw it, though he knew it was not there to see. A glowing rope ran from Agenor, white like the sunlight, heavier than a blacksmith's arm, lighter than air. It connected the Forsaken to something distant, something within Rand's grasp. It pulsed, and with every throb, Agenor grew stronger and more fleshed out, younger, healthier, and in time he stood before Rand as a tall, strong man, harder than Lan and deadlier than the Blight. It was still the cord that held Rand's attention. It hummed and sang to him. It called to his soul. A finger whipped of the cord lifted away toward him, and he gasped when it touched him. It filled him with light and warmth that took away the chill of the grave he'd felt. The strand thickened as he still hoped for a way to get free.
No! You shall not have it! It is mine!
Agenor screamed. Neither of them moved, yet they fought as surely as if they grappled in the dust. Sweat beaded on Agenor's head, that of a strong man in his prime now, and Rand pulsed with the beating of the cord. His mind was so full of the light that only a tiny corner of himself remained within the void he'd wrapped around himself. Agenor cried that it was his, as the warmth built up in Rand until it was as radiant as the sun.
Mine!
Agenor shouted again, as flames shot out of his eyes and he screamed. Rand kept thinking of getting away when suddenly he was no longer on the hilltop. He quivered with the light that suffused him, and he could barely think. The light stunned him in awe. He stood in a broad mountain pass, surrounded by jagged black peaks that looked like the Dark One's own teeth. He felt the rocks beneath his feet and the icy chill of the wind and knew it was real. Battle swirled around him, armoured men on horseback, stabbing at snarling Trollocs wielding spiked scythe-like swords. Some men were on foot as their horses were down, dead and injured, and some mounts ran around riderless. Hundreds of mounted Fades ran amongst them, night-black cloaks unstirring in the wind, and wherever their light-eating swords swung, men died. Sound beat down on Rand from every direction, the clash of steel, the panting and grunting of men, Trollocs snarling and the screams of the injured. Banners waved in the wind, the Black Hawk of Faldara, the White Heart of Shyanar, and Trolloc ones too, the horned skull of the Duval, the blood-stained trident of the Kobal, the iron fist of the Daimon. It seemed to be a lull in the battle as each side paused to regroup, and neither side noticed Rand. He found himself facing a human army, where riderless horses galloped and wounded men slumped in their saddles. They would not last much longer, yet still they drew up for one final charge. Some began to notice him, pointing and shouting at him. Staggering, he turned and saw the Shadowspawn forces massed and waiting, so many that the mountainside looked black and they dwarfed the Shayanaran army. Overhead, Drakkar wheeled on leathery pinions, their shrieks challenging the wind. The half-men began pointing at him, and Drakkar spun to dive upon him, until 6 were coming towards Rand. Heat built up in him as he stared at the Drakkar. He could clearly see their soulless eyes in their pale, man-like faces. Nothing in their winged bodies resembled humanity, and he became consumed by the terrible, crackling heat. From the clear sky, lightning lanced down, each bolt crisp and sharp, searing his eyes. They struck the Drakkar and their cries turned to shrieks of death, charred forms hitting the ground. All Rand could think of was the terrible heat of the light. He fell to his knees, tears running down his cheeks. Clutching at tufts of earth, he screamed, "No! Please, no!" The wind rose as he spoke, picking up his words to howl and roar down the pass. It whipped the flames of his heat into an inferno that sped toward the Trollocs, faster than a horse. Fire burnt into the Shadowspawn army, and the mountainside trembled with their screams. "It has to end!" Rand screamed as he beat the ground with his fists, bruising his hands as the earth rumbled. Ripples ran through the ground, turning into waves of dirt and rock, heading at the remaining Trollocs and Thades. The earth broke over them as the mountains shattered under their hooved feet. A boiling mass of flesh and rubble churned through the army, and what was left was still a mighty host. It only outnumbered the humans by twice now, and the Shadowspawn left milled around in fear and confusion. The wind died down along with the screams, and the earth settled back into stillness. Dust and smoke still whirled around Rand as he screamed, "The light blinds you, Ba'alzaman! This has to end!"
"It is not here."
A voice in Rand's mind made his skull vibrate.
"I will take no part. Only the chosen can do what must be done, if he will."
Rand couldn't stop himself from asking where, and the haze around him parted to reveal steps leading into the sky, each separate from the other and held up by nothing.
"Not here."
Through the mist came a distant cry. "The light wills it!" The ground began to shake as the Shyanarans began a new charge toward the Shadowspawn army, and within the void Rand knew a moment of panic. The charging lances would not be able to see him in the smoke, and he would be trampled. The greater part of his mind that was not his felt only anger as he began to mount the steps, thinking that it had to be ended. The sky turned to darkness, but he was still able to see the steps ahead, though the ones behind were now gone. There was no way back. The cord of light still connected him to a distant origin. Not as thick as before, but it still pumped strength into him, filling him with light and life. It felt like forever as he climbed until he came to a wooden door that he remembered well. As he touched it, it burst into fragments and he stepped through as they rained down around him. The chamber was as before, the heatless fireplace, the mad striated sky, and this time the mirror showed his face clearly. There is calm in the void, he thought. It showed on his face. But Ba'alzaman was now at the fireplace and said,
"Yes, I thought Agenor's greed would overcome him, but it makes no difference in the end. A long search but ended now. You are here and I know you."
Rand floated in his mind within the void and light. In a voice so calm it surprised him, Rand told Ba'alzaman,
"I am tired of running. I am tired of you threatening my friends. I will run no more."
He saw that Ba'alzaman was connected to a cord as well, this one a thicker black vein that ate the light as it pulsed. Ba'alzaman laughed that it makes no difference whether Rand runs or stays, and flame spumed from his mouth.
"You have fled from me many times, and each time I run you down and make you eat your pride with snivelling tears for spice. Many times you have stood and fought, then grovelled in defeat, begging mercy. You have a choice, worm. Kneel at my feet and serve me well, and I will give you power above thrones. Or be Tar Valon's puppet fool, and scream while you are ground into the dust of time."
Rand looked back as if seeking a way to leave, letting Ba'alzaman believe it was his intent. The Dark One's cord ran alongside Rand's, beating against the other, the light barely resisting the dark. Rand told him, "There are other choices. The wheel weaves the pattern, not you. Every trap you've laid for me, I have escaped. I've escaped your Trollocs, Thades, and Dark Friends. I trapped you here and destroyed your army on the way. You do not weave the pattern." Ba'alzaman's eyes roared like furnaces, and although his lips didn't move, Rand thought he heard him cursing Agenor. The fires dimmed and his ordinary human face smiled at Rand in a way that chilled the light and said,
"Other armies can be raised, fool. Armies you have not dreamed of will yet come. And you tracked me? You slug under a rock, track me? I began the setting of your path the day you were born, a path that led to your grave or here. Aiel allowed to flee and one to live to speak the words that would echo down the years. Jane Farstrider, a hero, whom I painted like a fool and sent to the Ogier thinking he was free of me. The Black Azure wriggling like worms on their bellies across the world to search you out. I pull the strings and the Amelin seat dances and thinks she controls events."
The void trembled and Rand hastily reinforced it, wondering how Ba'alzaman knew it all. Could it be the way he said? The light warmed the void, dampening his doubt into only a seed. He buried the seed and the void steadied, and he floated in calm. But Alzaman told him that it matters little to him if Rand lives or dies. It only affects the power Rand would have. He would rather he knelt to him while he was alive. Why else did he only send a fist of Trollocs to his village instead of 1,000? One dark friend to face him when 100 could have been sent while he slept. Rand belongs to him. He is his dog on a leash, brought to kneel to his master. Or die, and then his soul will be knelt. Rand told him, "I deny you. You have no power over me, and I will not kneel to you, alive or dead." But Alzaman's response was only to tell Rand to look. Unbidden, Rand turned his head and saw Egwene, Nynaeve, and another woman, a little older than the Wisdom, grey-eyed and beautiful, and dressed in Two Rivers garb. "Mother?" he breathed, and she smiled a hopeless smile. "No! My mother is dead, and the other two are safe away from here. I deny you." Egwene and Nynaeve's images dissipated into mist, leaving Carial Thor stood alone, eyes wide with fear. But Alzaman told him that she was his to do with as he pleased. Rand shook his head and repeated that he denies him. His mother is dead and safe within the light. Carrie's lips trembled and tears ran down her cheeks. "The Lord of the Grave is stronger than he once was, my son. His reach is longer. The Father of Lies has a honeyed tongue for unwary souls. My son, my darling son. I would spare you if I could, but he is my master now. His whim is the law of my existence. I can only obey him and grovel at his feet for his favor. Only you can free me. Please, my son, please, help me. Help me, please." A wail ripped from her as pale-faced Fades appeared around her, ripping her clothes with hands that held pincers and clamps that stung and burnt at her flesh. Her scream would not end, and Rand's scream echoed hers. The void boiled in his mind, and a sword appeared in his hand. Not his Heron-marked sword, but a blade of light. A blade of the light. As he raised it, a fiery white bolt shot from the point, hitting the nearest Fade, and the chamber was filled with a blinding incandescence that burnt through the remaining half-men. From within the brilliance he heard a whisper. "Thank you, my son. The light! The blessed light!" The flash faded, and he was alone with Baalzaman once more. The Dark One shied away from the sword as if it truly were the light, as he roared,
"Fool! You will destroy yourself. You cannot wield it so, not yet. Not until I teach you."
In a calm voice, Rand told him,
"It is ended,"
and swung, not at Baalzaman, but at the black cord behind him. The Dark One screamed as the cord severed, his wail trembling the stone walls. The unconnected end of the cord began to shrivel as it pulled back into the blackness, and Baalzaman was whipped into the fireplace. The walls shivered and cracked, chunks of stone began to fall as the ceiling collapsed. Rand lifted the sword again and repeated, "It is ended," and a light lanced from the point again, cascading into a shower of fiery sparks, like droplets of molten metal. Baalzaman threw up his hands in a vain attempt to protect himself, and the flames from his eyes joined those of the fireplace, until the stone itself ignited. Rand felt his own cord thinning, until only a glow remained, and he strained himself in his need to have this ended. The chamber became a solid flame, with Baalzaman writhing within, and his howls grated Rand's bones. The flame became a pure white light, and the last flicker of his thread was gone, and he fell through the endless black, only able to hear the last of Baalzaman's howl. Something struck him, turning him to a jelly that shook and screamed from the fire raging inside, the hungry cold burning without end.
Thanks for listening. Please like, share and subscribe and help get a new channel off the ground. Thank you.